Alright guys, so in our last set of notes we talked about the 6 basic principles of the Constitution. So we talked about federalism, separation of powers, checks and balances, judicial review, limited government, popular sovereignty. And so in this set of notes we are going to start talking about the formal amendment process, or the process in which the Constitution can be added to. And so, again, understand that the framers wrote the Constitution in 1787. However, it has endured and kept up with the astounding change and growth of our nation, and that is because it is flexible and because the framers created a document that we could delete parts of or change parts of, or, again, amend and add parts to the Constitution. Okay, so with that said, an example of something that has been eliminated from the Constitution would be the 3/5 Compromise. Now, remember, the 3/5 Compromise was the compromise between our northern and southern states. The southern states wanted slaves to be counted for representation, but not taxation, where the northern states kind of wanted to get rid of slavery altogether. And so the compromise here was that for every 5 slaves, 3 would count towards taxation and representation. And this is eliminated from the Constitution today. We've also added the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery. And again, it just proves that this document can be altered and should be as our world changes around us. Also understand that the ways in which we can make changes to the Constitution is either through a formal amendment or an informal amendment. And this set of notes is going to focus primarily on the formal amendment process. So here are some key terms that we are going to be talking about through this set of notes. So first and foremost, amendment. This is a change to the written words of the Constitution. Ratification, the act of approving a proposed amendment. Formal amendment, this is one of 4 ways to change or add to the written language of the Constitution. It's a 2-step process. It is proposal and then ratification. And again, there are 4 different ways that this can happen, and we'll talk about those in just a second. Bill of Rights, this is the name given to the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which guarantee basic freedoms. All 10 amendments were ratified in 1791. And just remember that the reason that we have the Bill of Rights is because the Anti-Federalists were not okay with the Bill of Rights not being included, because they were in fear that our freedoms would not be protected, and so they demanded that the Federalists create the Bill of Rights and add it to the Constitution, and it was ratified in 1791. All right, so introduction. How has the Constitution been amended? Through the formal amendment process. The majority of amendments, and again, there are 27 amendments. 1 through 10 are the Bill of Rights, but there are also additional amendments, 11 through 27, that have been added. They have been proposed by 2/3 vote of Congress. All right, so this is the U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives, and ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. And these are going to be the state legislatures within a particular state. And we'll talk a little bit more about state legislators on the next slide. An amendment can also be ratified by state conventions held in 3/4 of the states, and understand that this has only actually happened one time. Okay, state legislatures. This is kind of a confusing concept, so I wanted to add an additional slide to kind of cover it in a little bit more detail. Okay, so state legislatures or state governments work very similar to the national legislature or national government. And essentially, state legislatures, which can also be known as general assemblies or just legislatures, they're basically mini governments. Because they really do resemble our national government. And so it's basically like we have our national government in Washington, D.C., but in every single state we have these mini governments that look just like the national government. And what I mean by that is in each state, these mini governments, they have 3 branches of government. They have a Congress, filled with state legislatures, and they are bicameral legislatures. And so there is a Senate and a House of Reps in every single state, except for Nebraska. They're unicameral. They design, draft, and vote on bills and laws, just like our U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives do. Bills are sent to committees to be studied, just as they are in our U.S. Senate and U.S. House of Representatives at the national level. So how does it work? Each state is divided into legislative districts that contain roughly the same number of citizens. Citizens in each district then elect representatives to serve in the state legislatures, and they're representing the citizens of that district. Some of these, again, are called general assemblies. Others are state legislatures or just legislature. Why do we have state legislatures? Why do we have these mini state governments? Because if the national government had to deal with state and national issues, it would be very difficult for them to get much accomplished or get enough accomplished to meet the needs of Americans. Also, understand that here in the United States, and specifically in Ohio, we have 16 state legislatures. And our representative is Brad Wenstrup. All right, this image here just shows the 2017 legislative partisan composition. And so it shows each state, and it shows their views. So obviously red here is Republican, blue Democratic, yellow would be split, white is unicameral. Again, Nebraska is the only unicameral state Congress. Green independent, and turquoise popular Democratic Party. And again, you can see here that red dominates, the Republican Party dominates in each one of these states, and also right now the dominating party, the majority party, is the Republican Party. Okay, changing the times. The amendment process allows the Constitution to adapt to the changing needs of our nation and society. The United States has gone from a farming nation of less than 4 million people to a high-tech country with a population of more than 300 million. And we talked a lot about this last year in your American history course. The fact that we switched from an agricultural economy to a industrial economy. Portions of the Constitution have been added, deleted, or altered as a result of amendments. So Article 5 of the Constitution describes the amendment process in detail. Again, amendments may be proposed, and then they also will be ratified. And these are the ways in which they can be proposed. They can be proposed by 2/3 vote of each House of Congress. This is done for Amendments 26 and 27. Or by a national convention called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of the state legislatures. And this was done for the 21st Amendment. Then the second part of this process is that amendments can be ratified. They can be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or by conventions in 3/4 of the states. And this is a method that has not yet been used. Understand that ratify just means to sign or give formal consent and make it official. So this diagram here shows us a little bit better of the ways in which a formal amendment can take place. And again, on this side here, we have the 2 ways in which they can be proposed, and then the 2 ways in which they can be ratified. Proposed by Congress by 2/3 vote, and then ratified by state legislators of 3/4, or ratified by conventions held in 3/4 of the states. Can be proposed by national convention, ratified by 3/4 of state legislatures, or ratified by conventions held by 3/4 of the states. Now, understand that this represents federalism because we have both the state and national government involved in the formal amendment process. At the proposal level, we have our national government, Congress, and then at the ratification level, we have our states. And so it shows that the national government and the state governments are sharing power, and they are both a part of the amending, the formal amendment process of the Constitution, which is such an important ability. Okay, so federalism. How does the federal amendment process reflect the concept of federalism? So again, amendments are proposed at a national level, ratified at a state level by legislators or conventions. A state can reject an amendment and later decide to ratify it. But a state cannot change its mind after it votes to ratify an amendment. The president cannot veto proposed amendments. So what is the answer to our question here? How does the federal amendment process reflect the concept of federalism? It involves both the federal government and the states.